to run this code, how do I run my server that I'm developing right here? Victor, how can I run this code on the screen? Your voice is jacked up again. We'll come back to you. Yeah, it sounds like that helium thing. Daniel? How can I run this code?
Okay, did you want to do it in Thundercloud or
My server isn't running. This code isn't running.
I'm not sure then.
Okay. Kimberly?
Localhost.
Localhost is a nickname for a certain port or a certain telling the network to redirect to itself, to the own computer. Yeah. So I want to run JavaScript outside of the browser, basically.
Would it be Node then?
Yeah, so we're going to use nodemon. And then the file name I want to run is index.js. And then I have app listening on port 3000. So now, how do I test this route? How do I test this route? Ketzerin?
Go to localhost 3000.
Yeah, exactly. And success true. Welcome to the emoji server. Very nice. How can I test this? How can I test my create a user route? How can I test my create a user route? Zach, how can I test that route?
Would you want to put /user in the browser or in Thunder Client?
So why can't we use the browser?
Because it doesn't let you put in the request.
What types of requests doesn't it let you put in?
JSON request? No.
Well, kind of. A post request or put request or any requests that aren't GET. So we want to do a post request. So how do I have to modify this to get a post request to test this route I wrote? What has to change here? David?
So you move that to post.
Yep.
And then in your body.
My body, yep.
Right. And then you go ahead and you put your whatever the docs say to put in there, whatever it is you're trying to post.
Yeah, that's a good answer. But from this code right here, can you tell what we need?
Oh, you need a name.
Yeah, and that's it. Whoops. Okay, that's very nice. What's the address? If my code is running locally, my server, how do I hit it?
It's localhost and then /users.
Yeah, exactly. So I send this request and it looks good. It worked. So that is what we did. That is what we did yesterday. We used our fake database. So why isn't that the end of the story? Why can't we just use the fake database? Why are we going to spend so much sweat and tears learning SQL and Prisma? Any ideas?
Because the information has to be stored.
Info has to be stored permanently. And all our code is just running in RAM. Well, our code is stored, but any new information from the user is just in memory and it'll disappear. So that's why we need a real database. So we are going to use a SQL database called a provider, cloud provider, I guess, called CockroachDB, kind of a weird name. So let's go ahead and create a database. So we're going to go to cockroachlabs.cloud. You're going to log in, create an account here. Maybe I'll put this address. Oops. So yeah, create an account, blah, blah, blah. Click create cluster. I mean, there's only one option, so it's not too hard. Serverless, you'll remember because it's the one you don't have to pay for, right? I think, some of you international people might want to change this to whatever region is the closest to you. Or not. It's not the most important thing in the world. Yeah, actually just probably leave it. It's fine. If this was like a production app, maybe you'd want to do that. Anyway, create cluster. It's all free. So remember what are the three main components of a full stack application, right? What are those main pieces that talk to each other? Do you remember, Renata?
Sorry, can you ask me again?
The three main components that makes up a full stack application.
So server.
Yeah.
And database.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the third one is.
Front end or client. But anyway,
okay.
We're finally getting to that third part. This is the database, that third component, right? So here, generate and save a password. And then copy it and store it somewhere. I'm obviously going to delete this. Actually, we can talk about this. So remember when we said there's some files we don't want Git to track? And we said node modules. And then what else did I tell you guys? There's sometimes information we don't want Git to track. Do you remember, Brian?
The API. Keys.
Keys, our passwords. So traditionally, we create a file called .env. So we're going to put that in our .gitignore, and then we're going to create that file. So now Git is not tracking this. And now, for right now, I'm just going to put this password here, but we'll come back to this in a second. Just so I have it stored somewhere. And then I'll delete this cluster because this is going to be on YouTube, right? So I'll have to remember to delete it and remind me if I forget. So let me do that, I guess. Generate cluster, generate and store password. Remember to gitignore .env. Click next. So now a cluster can contain many databases. So we're going to go ahead and click add a new database. Add new database. What are we working on? Lecture Spray and Pray is a great name. So we'll go with that. And then in this option language, you want to choose what we're using is JavaScript. And then we can go ahead and copy this database URL and paste paste it into here. And then we just have to delete this environment prefix because we don't need it. So paste the environment, paste the database URL, paste database URL into .env. And maybe I'll give you a hint, like it will look like this. Again, I'm going to delete this. This would be awful if this was a real, whoops, that's way too big. Well, who cares? Can I do this? Yeah. Okay, so we have the database URL there, and I think we're actually good for a second with CockroachDB. So we'll come back to this, but I think we're good for the moment. So it might not seem like we did much, but we now have a running database. The thing is, it's completely empty. So this database has no tables. So we're actually done creating the database, so we can switch to a different topic. So we have to think about tables in a database. So any idea what what do I mean by a table in a database? Any intuition there from the pre-work or anything? Open to the class.
Is it a set of related information like an Excel spreadsheet would be?
Yeah, that's perfect. So like an Excel spreadsheet, you are giving the database a heads up about the types of info you are going to be providing. So an example of a table that we're going to create, I think we're only going to have one table in this database. And does anyone know the name of what this table is going to be that we're going to create?
Users?
Yeah. So it would be users, but actually in SQL it'd be users, but in Prisma, we actually will use an uppercase letter and we'll use the singular. So here we have to tell Prisma and SQL that we're going to be making users and we're going to call it user. And then you basically have to tell it, well, what makes up a user? What are the keys of a user? And what are the properties of a user? What makes up a user?
A name.
Yeah. We'll start with ID. And then in Prisma, you're going to have to tell it what an ID is. So what data type is an ID?
A number?
Yeah, but in Prisma, I think we'll have to say int, but we'll get there in a second. There's some other stuff, but we'll talk about it later. So the other things are a name. What data type is that? Monica, what data type is a name?
A string.
Yeah. And then what data type is count? Jazz.
An integer.
Yeah. So this is all a table is. We have to give a heads up to Prisma to say this is what we're gonna like be making, deleting, updating, right? All those CRUD operations. So, how do we, from our code, how do we tell Cockroach that what tables we're going to be creating? And we do that by using Prisma. So now I guess we'll talk about how do I use, or maybe what is Prisma? We'll start there, right? What'd you get about your buddy at the bar asked you about what is Prisma? What is it? What does it do for us? Anyone?
is it a framework? Like kind of like how React is a framework for JS? This is a framework for SQL?
We don't call it a framework, so I wouldn't use that word.
ORM.
Yeah, we say ORM. Do you know what that stands for, Ronald?
I think it's like object relational mapping.
Yeah, I think so too. Although I wouldn't bet too much money on it. Object relational mapping, but let's verify that, right? Yeah. So that's the interview answer. But then for your buddy at the bar, what does Prisma actually do for us is the more interesting to me answer.
Doesn't it like help you neatly store and access data?
Helps what?
It like helps you neatly like store it and access data.
Yeah. Uh-huh. For sure. But the mental model I want you to have is it's the communication from our JavaScript code to the SQL database. Because remember how we talked about how JavaScript wasn't even originally the main language of servers? It wasn't any language of servers. It was like C or C++ or Python or Java. SQL, when SQL was invented, JavaScript, I don't even think the web was a thing when SQL was invented. SQL is like ancient. It's a cool language, but be grateful we don't have to learn another language, right? We have enough of them. So all these languages have to communicate with SQL, but Prisma allows us to do it in this very easy way that we're used to, using objects that we're very familiar with. So we don't have to learn raw SQL, which is actually my background. I did raw SQL my entire years teaching. So yeah, this is the first class that we're using Prisma for. And it's just like so much nicer so far, so much easier. So that is Prisma. How do we use Prisma? Anyone know the first steps in a node server? How to get started with Prisma? So we want to be able to easily communicate to our database to create those tables, specifically the user table we talked about. What are the steps we need to actually install Prisma? Well, I kind of gave it away, right?
MPI or MPMI Express, or sorry, Prisma.
Yeah, so we're going to install Prisma, right? It's a node library. Does anyone know step 2? First off, let's refresh our memories. What did that do? What did that do when I installed a node library? It did 2 main things. What did that do?
Does it add to the dependency?
There we go. That's number 1. Right here, it's telling other developers and even ourselves, if we delete node modules, this is what the code we rely on for our project. And then it did what else?
It adds the module?
It adds the actual code. So someone else wrote Prisma in JavaScript, and we're using it now. Okay, so what's the second step to use Prisma, to get set up?
You initialize it?
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you remember the command?
NPI
NPX
NPX
Prisma init. Yeah. And that's going to create us one file. Does anyone remember? It's kind of random and hard. I'll just go for it. So it's going to create a Prisma folder and schema.prisma. And here we have to change provider to Which of these options looks tasty for us?
The cockroach.
Yeah, our gross named database, right? We have to change provider to CockroachDB. That's it. We're ready to go, right? Except, also an extension you guys are all gonna have to download is called Prisma. Easy enough, right? And then it will do things for you you want it to do, like suggestions, IntelliSense, all the good stuff, all the coloring and stuff, and auto suggestions. Yeah. I'll remind you if you forget about that, though. Yeah, so now what was our objective, right, with this database and our empty cockroach database? We want to give it a table. That's step one after we create the database, telling it what to expect, what kind of models. So how can we model this user? So this is what a user looks like, and we even did a little table here. But how can we now, in our schema, tell Prisma what to expect a user to look like? Does anyone remember the syntax?
User, a big U.
We are going to use a big U, but there's a keyword that comes before it, a Prisma specific keyword.
Is it model?
Yeah. So model user, and then we need some curly braces. And then what property does every table gonna have?
Name?
No, not necessarily. A tweet might not have name. ID, yeah.
ID.
And we said an ID is type int. And here we're getting an error, right? It says basically it needs an ID. So it doesn't know just because we called it an ID that it's actually an ID. So we have to do something called a decorator and say @ID. And now it's happy. But remember when I told you how IDs is really cool because it's something we don't have to worry about. The database will generate for us. To get it to do that, does anyone remember what we need to do? Basically, we want it so that... Go ahead.
At default.
Yeah, so we say at default. And then in here...
Increment, auto increment.
Yeah, why isn't it auto? Let's look this one up. Prisma default ID auto increment. What did that look like again? So this is what I usually use, the UUID, but I was thinking today we would do, oh, there it is. Yeah, auto increment. Why doesn't it like that? Auto increment? Default auto. Oh, okay. We need to change this to big int. Okay, that's fine. Okay, that's ID, right? So now every user that gets created, it will be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 500, and we never have to think about it, which is pretty cool. So same, help me out with the name. How am I going to tell Prisma what to expect from my name here? Gyang?
Yeah, you can put name and then string.
Yep. That's an easy one.
Yeah.
And then count, help me out. Kevin, what do I put?
I'm not sure.
So the variable name we want to call count, and then the data type is going to be an int. Yeah.
Quick question: what's the difference between int and the big int that you had to put for the first ID?
How big, how much memory is being allocated to store that number? So how many bytes is a big int? So a normal int is 4 bytes. So 32 bits, right? So zeros and ones, think of transistors. So it can go up to, what is this, 2 billion or 2 trillion? I don't even know. 100,000 million, billion, 2 billion. And this one goes way bigger. I have no idea what. Probably, I don't know. I don't know what's beyond trillions. Quad. I don't know. It goes high enough. It's kind of silly that we're never going to have an application, especially in this course, that goes above even a couple hundred, right? But for some reason, it was making us use big int, which is bizarre because maybe that was a recent update, because I've watched, other people do or use normal int, I thought, a bunch, but it doesn't matter too much. We have a little more storage.
It's not going to ask the same for count, or is it count as something separate?
Well, count, we aren't designated either as at ID or at default. So count, it's not yelling at us about. Yeah. I might look this up later on, because that does seem a little strange to me. But the core concept is not going to matter or be too different. So now we've successfully described to at least Prisma what our database is going to look like. But the problem is CockroachDB has no idea. It says this database has no tables. So now once we have our schema, how do we tell Cockroach what the database looks like? Does anyone remember this step? We want to migrate these changes in our schema over to Cockroach.
We're going to migrate.
Yeah, so we're going to do npx migrate dev. So we're going to do npx Prisma migrate dev. So this is taking the schema and letting Cockroach know to use it. The naming doesn't matter too much. I'll just call it initial. And it tells me it worked. So I go over to Cockroach, click refresh. And now we have 2 tables. So Prisma did some weird stuff we don't really have to care about, but we see that it created a user table. So we're happy. I've been talking for a while. Any questions on that? I'm trying to record all this here, but I know this is going to be a hassle for sure.
Yeah, Max, how does Cockroach database know about this, your files here?
Oh, that's a great question. The connection is this URL. So just like how we had to give a GitHub remote address, we're specifying right here. So this is where Cockroach lives. So our code, Prisma, is reaching out to this URL. And because it has my authentication, Cockroach knows that I'm legit. Yeah, that's a good question.
How's the schema reaching in? Like, how's it communicating with the MV file? Because I guess I could see there. You're telling it oh, never mind. I see.
Right here. So Prisma is using some kind of function to do that connection that we have no visibility on or don't really even care about. We just trust that they worked it.
And then you got that URL when you created the database
Yep.
on Cockroach, right?
Yep.
So that was provided. All you're doing is copying, pasting.
Yeah. So here was, if you click connect, it's giving you instructions on how to connect the database right here. And if you ever forget, it's right here. The problem is you'll have to, if you forget your password, you'll have to regenerate it. And then all your old databases, if you're using the same password, will break, which I've discovered. So that's a little annoying. I wish there was an option to just show it again, but I don't think there is. So
When you copied and pasted it from there, you
no, it won't.
You manually
Yeah.
you had to manually
if
put
you
in
forget
the
your
in
password,
that slot.
you have to regenerate. If you copy it here, it'll still have this placeholder. So a little bit annoying, but it's just for security.
So it's a good idea to just store that like on our own somewhere, and then just copy and paste it onto the.
I think
the
most useful is just you'll have it stored in your .env, and then when you make a new project, go ahead and copy it into your new .env. So every project from now on is going to have a .env file, so you can just copy it over from there. That's the easiest.
So you leave your key inside the file. You're just removing it because it's
.env
on here right now?
is where it's safe. Obviously, it's not safe now because I'm streaming.
Okay.
But when you're developing, this is where it's safe. Yeah.
You have somewhere that you ignored this password?
I did, yeah, the git ignore. So we specified to ignore, don't push this to GitHub, node modules, and .env. Because if we didn't have this .env, this would go to GitHub, and everybody in the world would have access to my password. These are really good questions, though. Anything else?
What's that code right there, or what you have right there, where it shows like that async function, or like
what
you had that window open?
Oh, earlier. The connect. Oh, yeah, this is like if we were using normal SQL, raw SQL, that they're giving us a little demo of how we would connect, but we're ignoring all this. Yeah.
Okay.
This is what I actually used to use.
Around
PG.
No, that wrapped around async function, is that called like an iffy or something?
It is,
like
yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Is that like, do people use that a lot?
It's used behind the scenes in JavaScript in a major way, I think, to create modules. But I don't think we'll ever have a use case for an iffy in normal, just learning how to make full stack applications. But it's a very important idea. I think that provides us with like the foundation for modules. But I don't have enough of a knowledge base to really speak on that. Okay, so what's that?
I just had a question. Where did you save your password for the database?
Well, it's just right here.
Okay, and it'll stay there.
Yeah. So this is my username, and this is my password, and this is like the actual URL for the database, Cockroach. It's a little hard to see, but username : password. Yeah, good question. Okay, so we have a functioning database, right? That's awesome. Now we can do this and delete this fake one. The problem is this whole server going to break? Not yet. How about if I do this request? Who thinks it's going to break the server? Break. Ryan's the only one who thinks it's going to break. Why is it going to break, Ryan?
I'm not sure, but yeah.
I think you're the only one just brave enough to raise their thumb. It's not going to break because we're not actually using anything really in this route. There's no database connection here. But if we get here, it's going to break for sure, right? Or not. Well, Why didn't it break? Why didn't this break? The user should be undefined, right? Oh, because it's... Why didn't this break? I feel like that code should break. The reference error, right? Not defined. But maybe it just doesn't care? I don't know. Huh. What's going on? Did I not use NodeMod? Huh. I don't know why that's not breaking. Does anyone have any ideas? I'm having a brain blank. Yeah. To me, that looks like it should be breaking. I don't know why. Is this even working? Hi. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Is it because in the schema you put users? But I don't know.
Because it's generating an error, okay, in this code, and then Express is picking up that error, and it's getting picked up here, and it's giving me my exact what I asked it to do. Users is not defined, so it generated the error in a way I wasn't used to. That's all. It was doing exactly what I asked it to do. So it did generate an error, right? So how can we fix this? We need to get the actual users from the database. That's kind of exciting. So now how from the code can we connect to Cockroach? And the whole point of that is Prisma. So if we do Prisma getting started, I think there's a good little guide. And you choose Prisma with Express, because the name of our servers are Express servers. And then you scroll down to the example. A pretty good little example right here. So we can actually just copy it and paste it. So we're importing something called Prisma client from Prisma. And then we're instantiating a new Prisma object. And now we can go ahead and use it to send whatever we want. So here I can say Prisma dot, my model is user, and then I have all these methods. So the database is like, what do you want me to do? I can do whatever you want. I can create a user. I can edit a user. I can find a user. I can delete a user. I can update a user. So which one do you think we want to do for this get path for users?
Find many?
Yeah, we want all of them. So what does this return? This method. What do we think this returns?
Would it be an object?
It is an object, but it's a special kind of object. Does
The
anyone
JSON
remember?
one?
It's a promise. So how do we resolve this promise?
Await.
Yeah, so we throw a wait before it, and then we have to make this an async function. And then we want to store the result in a variable, and a good name for that is users, right? And now we refresh, and we have no users, but we also have no error. That's nice. Does it make sense that we have no users in this new database we created? Yeah, it makes sense. So another really incredible thing, probably the most impressive thing to me about Prisma, is this tool called Prisma Studio. It will give you a visual representation of your database, and you can even insert dummy data. So here we're seeing the user table, and I can go ahead and add a record of Daniel, save the change, and look, oh, weird. Okay. I thought this would start at the number 1, right? That's weird to me that it started that high, but I guess it ultimately doesn't really matter. I can add another record of Kimberly. Oops. I forgot to press save. It's a little finicky, but is this number? I don't love that it did that. Auto increment ID. Okay. Anyway, it's just an ID. We really just care that it's unique. That's its purpose. Besides for that, it doesn't really matter that much. I was just surprised. I thought it'd be like literally the number 1 and then 2. So now in our database, we actually have these fields. And now when I do this request, I shut down my server, so I have to restart it. And now I have an error. I have an error I haven't seen, so this might be a problem. Do not know how to serialize a big int users. Console.log users. Okay. So, let's change this back. Or not back. Let's change the string.
Hey, Max, I've got a question.
Yeah.
That user, is that case sensitive when you have user? In Prisma, it was a capital U, right?
Yeah, where are you talking about?
Go back to your index.js and then line 16.
Yeah, it's case sensitive, but for some reason, it lowercases it for us. That is the pattern, though. It is a little weird that we uppercase it one place and it auto makes it lowercase, but that is the situation. Anyway, this big int is causing us some problems because the number is so big. I think like it's just causing us problems. So we're going to go ahead and switch our data type for the ID to be what's called a UUID. And this is just a library that's very popular that auto-generates random strings to use as IDs. Now the thing is, we made a change to our schema. How, again, do we get those changes to Cockroach?
Migrate.
Yeah. Do you remember the command?
No. Prisma migrate? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Migrate dev.
Okay.
But this might be actually a good error because it might not let us. And I want to show you guys what to do when you reach that situations. So it's warning us. Oh, okay. It's warning us that it's going to change the data type, which was what we want. And I'll just call this migration ID. That was actually easier than I thought it'd be. I thought it would generate an error. It still might. It's still taking its time. In another terminal, I'm going to run Prisma Studio. I don't think they will conflict with each other.
What was the studio for?
To visually see what's in your database.
Okay.
So it looks like this might still be working. I don't know why this is taking so long. It never takes this long. But anyway, it looks like it removed everything in our database because we made a change that it couldn't probably like reconcile. So we'll add back Ketzerin. Oh, never mind. We got him back.
So with just to build up on that question, this Prisma Studio, it is not just visualizing our table. We can
Yes.
interact with it live and actually make and apply changes to the table.
Yeah. Yep. It's more than just visual. Yep. We can add, delete, probably do other things, but those are the main ones I've done. I do not know why it's not ending this, but anyway, let me shut this down and rerun our database and see if we're good or not. Although there might be trouble. So we want to do this request to users. Yeah, we still... Okay, so that big int really screwed us up, right? So what we're going to do is do Prisma migrate reset to kind of clean it out, the database. This is like unplugging it and plugging it back in. And then hopefully we can get this working. All right, let me try the other nuclear option, is just deleting this migrations folder. And let me try to migrate again. Okay. I think we might actually be good now. Let's see. Okay, save the change. Daniel, we got a UUID, which is what I'm used to. I shouldn't have tried to switch to integers. We'll just use UUID. That's the standard anyway, or very popular option. All right, so we have these nice auto-generated IDs that are guaranteed to be unique, at least like in this universe or something. And let's try to make the request again, right? So I have to run my server again. And finally, we get our actual response from the database. So we are not relying on the fake database anymore. We have the real one. Any questions on that? I know we ran into some bugs, but it's part of it.
Do you to add like the information into the database, do you have to do that Prisma Studio step, or is there another way?
Well, no, so there's no one at Twitter every tweet typing in manually into Prisma Studio your tweets, right? We're going to do it from code. So that brings us to our next objective.
Oh.
How do we create a user, right? So here we did users.push. We're definitely not going to do that. Users doesn't even exist anymore. Now, does anyone have a brainstorm of how can we use Prisma to ask it to create a user? Maybe we first off start with how do we make a request? How do we make a request to our server to create a user?
We have to make a post request?
Yeah, I mean, really, we look at the docs, right? So spray and pray docs. So with post request, it just needs a name, it looks like. So Daniel said to change this to a post. What's the URL we're going to use if we're developing, if our server is running locally? Roman?
Localhost.
Yeah, and we chose port 3000. And then what's our path if we want to make a new user?
Users.
Yeah. And then what other information does it have to provide?
Name.
Yeah, so we have to click on body and give it a name. And that might be it, right? So we're getting success true, but we're not getting a user object. But that's how we send the request. But now how do we actually put it in the database using Prisma? We said success true, but that's a lie at this point. Nothing. If we look at Prisma Studio, Roman won't be there. So how do we put Roman in there?
We need a way to connect to Prisma, right?
Well, we already have it. We're connected with this Prisma object.
Oh, okay. Then we could just give the command, right? Prisma, like .create or something.
Almost. First, you use the model. So
user.
And then create. And this is cool. The docs are really good. It gives you a little example of how to use create. So it wants a property called data that's an object. So we give it an object with a property data that's itself is an object as well. And what property does data need? What's the one property we need to create a user?
Name.
Yeah. And name is equal to what?
Name?
Name.
Request. Okay.
But we can use the shortcut. So now let's fire on this request again and see what happens. So we send the request. We got success true still. This time it might actually be true. No, I guess not. So what did we do?
Is it because we have to await it? Does it
Yeah, but it still should have worked.
Oh.
I thought. But anyway, we do have to await it, turn this async, and then here we want to show the user that we actually successfully created a user, which I don't think we did. I don't know why that didn't work. But anyway, let's see why it didn't work. Let's try to hit it again. Okay, so we got an error. Count is missing. Interesting. So our intention was that this is by default what?
0.
Yeah. So how? Any guesses how we can do that? How we can tell Prisma by default that should be 0?
You declare it there.
Yeah, our decorator at default. And what's the argument?
0.
Yeah. Now we made a change to the schema. How do we let Cockroach know about our changes? Hara.
You migrate.
Yep.
So npx Prisma migrate. Yeah.
Yep. Hopefully this time it'll work now that big int is gone. Count. Cool. So rerun our server. And now re-hit it. So Thunder client, send this request. And this time I think we actually are good. So Roman is in the database. Questions on that?
So If the database is expecting an ID and name and account, how come it's not? We can't see account on that table. On
Just
Cockroach.
because of the showing, I think. Or sorry, this fields. I don't.
Oh, okay.
It just
I
didn't show it.
assumed.
I don't know why. But yeah, maybe because they're all 0, but we can change that. It's 10. Yeah, that is weird. By default, it doesn't show them all. Yeah.
Every time you migrate, do you have to name?
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Kind of like a git commit message. I don't know why, but you do. So. Okay, I think that might be a good stopping place for today. We have 2 more days of lecture, so we can take our time, kind of. Any final questions? So, yeah, you're going to go ahead.
Sorry. You did the Prisma part 2 different ways, like for the users and then, or the get, sorry, and then the post. Can you just go over that, I guess?
Yeah, so Prisma allows us to ask the database to do every category of request we can do. So the create, read, update, or delete. Here, we're just asking it to do the get request. So like find many, it's called. So it just gets all the users. But down here, we asked it to do something else. We asked it to create a new user. And in the future, we're going to ask it to delete a user and update a user. And probably even more things than that. Find specific users and stuff.
What was the command to do the studio again? Is it the npx Prisma Studio?
Yeah. So to see that nice GUI from Prisma, npx Prisma Studio.
Hey Max, where's it? If we wanted a list of the Prisma commands for Express, where did we find that? Like, what's the best place?
Well, the Prisma docs, probably. So, yeah. Oh, CRUD, I use a bunch. So here's the main things you're going to want to do. So if you were like, how do I delete with Prisma? It's pretty nice right here. Yeah. All right. Any final questions? But again, this is just, there's a lot more to cover, but we do have 2 days.
I just have a question, but is there any like specific reason why you choose that kind of database for us? Like,
Free was the biggest for you guys,
okay.
Right? It worked easily with Prisma, and that was it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That was all the requirements.
Yeah.
The beauty of Prisma, though, it really is just as easy as switching it out here to anything you prefer. Oh, weird. I just Googled if it works with MongoDB, and they told me no.